before we go in there. We just can't go in blind hoping they'll, meet us with roses again. But my main thing was to just, if you really want to talk about NSA and security.
Washington Journal live daily at 7 a.m. Eastern and always at cspan.org. Congressman Connolly and his House colleagues gaveling in next for more consideration of the Farm Bill.
House will be in order. Prayer will be offered by the guest chaplain, Reverend James Rader from the Pilgrim Lutheran Church in Bellevue, Washington.
Lord, you are our strength. Grant that we may become a people united in love and peace. Grant favor to all who hold office in our land, especially President Obama and Vice President Biden, this Congress, governors, legislatures, all who make and administer our laws. May all be high in purpose, wise in counsel, firm in good resolution, and unwavering in duty. Holy Spirit, we commend to you our schools, those who learn and teach, that our children may thrive in safe havens and bring forth the fruit of their lives and dreams. Grant our armed forces personnel and families courage and success, and us, for whom they sacrifice, our unending respect and gratitude. Receive our thanksgiving for those who serve, protect, labor, farm, care, heal, create, and lead. Thank you for this abundant land. Give us calm compassion to live as one nation under you. In Jesus' name, amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved.
Mr. Speaker.
What purpose does the gentlelady from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 1, Rule 1, I demand a vote on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal.
The question is on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The journal stands approved.
Mr. Speaker.
Gentlelady from North Carolina.
I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present and make the point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentlelady from North Carolina, Ms. Fox.
Please join in the pledge to our wonderful flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Without objection, the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Reichert, is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm honored to rise to welcome my good friend, Reverend James Rader, and his daughter Mellie, who is with him today. Jim and I have known each other since our college days at Concordia Lutheran University in Portland, Oregon, before he went on to receive his Master of Divinity from Concordia Seminary in St. Louis, Missouri. Reverend Rader was ordained into the Missouri Synod of the Lutheran Church at Our Redeemer Evangelical Lutheran Church in Honolulu, Hawaii, and is currently a pastor at Bellevue Pilgrim Lutheran Church and preschool in Bellevue, Washington. His passion for service extends far beyond the four walls of his home church. He has been a committed volunteer and supporter of causes like the Northwest Lutheran Ministry Services, the Emergency Feeding Program of Seattle, the Sophia's Way Women's Shelter, and the Free Burma Rangers. And Mr. Speaker, I thank Reverend Rader for being with us here today, and I thank him for his dedication for serving others. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back his time. The Chair will entertain 15 further requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. What purpose does the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition? The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a fourth-generation farmer, I know firsthand how important the Farm Bill is for farmers. I believe that we need a Farm Bill, but I also believe we need a responsible Farm Bill. Unfortunately, the bill passed out of the Rules Committee last night is a farm bill in name only. 80% of the spending going toward food stamps. This isn't the solution American taxpayers deserve. Washington's unholy alliance of farm policy and nutrition policy has spun out of control, and now we will consider a massive trillion-dollar spending package called a Farm Bill. Mr. Speaker, we must have an up or down vote to split the Farm Bill into a true farm-only farm bill and a separate food stamp bill. The American people deserve an honest conversation about how Washington spends their money. We've made progress by ending direct payments, but there's more work ahead. Let's do our work in the full light of day by splitting this bill and having serious debate on both farm and welfare policy. Without that debate, I cannot in good conscience vote for a welfare bill passed on the backs of hardworking American farmers. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. What purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition? The gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor and celebrate Juneteenth. Each June 19th, we observe Juneteenth to commemorate the end of slavery in the United States. Juneteenth is observed in 42 states, including my home state of New York. In Buffalo, we are proud to have the third largest Juneteenth celebration in the nation. In Buffalo, we are also proud to have a rich history in the anti-slavery movement. The Michigan Street Baptist Church hosted abolitionist Frederick Douglass at an anti-slave gathering in 1943, and Booker T. Washington in 1910. Nearby, Buffalonian Mary Talbert opened her home to prominent African-American leaders in the early 1900s and founded the Niagara Movement, which was a forerunner of the NAACP. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to honor Juneteenth, to honor the strength of our nation's African-American heritage, and to celebrate the promise of an even stronger future. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. What purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, our country remains in a state of economic stagnation. Nearly 12 million of our fellow Americans are out of work. 4.4 million people have been out of work for 6 months or more. We deserve better. America deserves better. We deserve more than the political posturing with which Washington Democrats continue to respond to the problems facing our nation. House Republicans offer real solutions. We've passed a long-term student loan fix to keep rates from doubling this summer, a plan that's similar to the President's plan. But yet the Democrats in the Senate cannot even get that bill passed. It's time to get past politics here. We need to create jobs. We must grow our economy and secure the future for all Americans. That's what hard-working taxpayers deserve, and that's what House Republicans offer. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentlelady from Maine seek recognition? Massachusetts. You're still recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, since assuming control of the House of Representatives, Republicans have brought 10 bills to the floor to limit a woman's constitutionally protected right to make choices regarding her own health. In January, we were told that the Republican majority was going to rebrand and refocus on the economy. Yet this week, my Republican colleagues once again ignored the pressing problems of many American families and brought a bill to the floor that would reverse decades of progress for women's health. H.R. 1797 was muscled through by an all-male Republican panel, would upend Roe v. Wade, and contains only the narrowest of exceptions for women who are victims of rape or incest. I received an email Monday from a constituent that I think best sums up the problems with the bill. In this email, the constituent, who is an abuse victim and incest survivor, urged me to stop this dangerous bill from becoming law and threatening the health of women who, like her, are in the most desperate and tragic of circumstances. While the bill passed the House yesterday, I am happy to say that it will not be acted upon in the Senate. I urge my colleagues to stop these dangerous games with women's health and confront the true problems that are facing the country. Thank you.
Gentlelady's time has expired. What purpose does the gentlelady from North Carolina seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, Mr. Speaker.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just this morning I met with student leaders from North Carolina visiting the Capitol as part of the 2013 Electric Cooperative Youth Tour. One student asked me a question about what the House of Representatives is doing to advance education and job creation. It was a perfect question given our House Republican plan for jobs and leadership to keep federal student loan interest rates from doubling on July 1st. Almost 12 million Americans are struggling to find work. 4.4 million have been out of work for more than 6 months. Young people and recent college graduates looking for jobs are disproportionately impacted in this economy. Washington shouldn't be adding additional stress to students' job hunts. But on July 1st, if the President fails to lead and the Democrat Senate fails to act, student loan interest rates will double for student borrowers. The House agrees with students. Hashtag don't double my rates. And we have acted to stop the increase. It's time for the Senate to do its job. Students are depending on them. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back her time. What purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition? Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to speak against the cuts to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program in the Farm Bill on this Juneteenth 2013. As the nation's most important anti-hunger program, SNAP offers nutrition assistance to 46 million low-income Americans and provides economic benefits to communities. SNAP also allows families to more easily set aside a portion of their resources for food and to prioritize a healthier, more consistent diet without compromising on obligations such as rent, utilities, and transportation. The proposed Farm Bill would cut $20.5 billion from the SNAP program and leave over 66,000 Texans without any assistance. We cannot allow the budget to be balanced on the backs of the poor and the most vulnerable in our country. I did the SNAP challenge. I lived on $4.50 for 1 day, and I can tell you that it's not easy, especially if you're trying to eat healthy. We need to find ways to fund federally funded nutrition incentive programs that will help hard-working taxpayers save money on health care costs in this country. For many Americans, SNAP is the only form of income assistance they receive. I join my colleagues in supporting the McGovern Amendment, which eliminates the draconian cuts to ensure that 46 million people who rely on this program will have food on their dinner table each night. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from Utah seek recognition? Gentleman from Utah is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week marks the 50th anniversary of National Small Business Week. Now, a lot of people think of small business and think, well, what's the big deal? What difference does that really make? Here's the reality. 60% of the jobs created in the last 20 years were created by small business. I'm honored to represent the great state of Utah, especially as a former small business owner. With over 57,000 small businesses that have employed more than 500,000 people in my state, it's clear to me that small business is the backbone of our economy. Forbes magazine recently named Utah the best state in the nation for business careers and for small businesses for the 3rd consecutive year. Utah has reached the high caliber status through supporting pro-business environment. It offers a low corporate and a low personal income tax rate. Our cost of energy is 27% lower than the national average. Pro-business policies like this in Utah help to spur our economy and to create jobs, and they contribute to one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country. Being a small business owner, I recognize the amount of hard work it is required to run a small business. I congratulate the small business owners and wish them a successful Small Business Week. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back my time.
The gentleman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentlelady from California seek recognition? The gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week marks the 50th anniversary of National Small Business Week. Small businesses are a vital part of our nation's fabric, a big source of opportunity, pride, and good-paying jobs in the communities that I serve. And here's what I'm doing in California for my district and my small businesses. We're connecting our small businesses to the power of the ports to help export their goods to new markets overseas. We're helping to clear away the misinformation and uncertainty about what the Affordable Care Act really means for small businesses. We're providing resources and information to expand their access to capital to help them grow and get more customers coming in their door. Small businesses are the backbone of our economy. When our small businesses are strong, our nation is strong. All Americans should take the opportunity this week to shop at a small business. Thank you.
The gentlelady yields back her time. What purpose does the gentleman from Montana seek recognition? The gentleman from Montana is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize my friend, Montana Public Service Commissioner Chairman Bill Gallagher, who was recently diagnosed with early-stage pancreatic cancer. Cindy and I join the people of Montana in keeping Bill and his family in our prayers during this most difficult time. Sadly, this is a disease that affects all too many Montanans. Yesterday, I met with Abby Brown, a Pancreatic Cancer Action Network volunteer from my hometown of Bozeman, who recently lost her dad to pancreatic cancer. She shared stories about her dad's fight, as well as those of other Montanans, like Gallatin County District Judge Mark Gunther, who was also a friend of mine. Abby also told me the importance of regular checkups and healthy living as key preventive measures in lowering one's chance of being diagnosed with higher-risk cancers. Unfortunately, cancer has affected each and every American in some way. I hope all Montanans will work to promote cancer awareness and, even more importantly, taking preventive measures to prevent cancer and increase early diagnosis. Know it, fight it, end it. I yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Request to speak for 1 minute.
The gentleman asks for unanimous consent. Does the gentleman ask for unanimous consent?
Unanimous consent, please.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank Congressman McGovern for his leadership on an amendment to the Farm Bill. This Farm Bill will have a serious and devastating impact. It will damage the lives of millions of vulnerable, struggling, hard-working Americans. They are scraping by on the worst economy since the Great Depression. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle say 47 million Americans on food stamps is too many. I agree. 47 million Americans on food stamps means too many Americans unemployed. It means too many underemployed living in poverty. Rather than pointing the finger at these people, we need to point it at ourselves. What has the Republican-led House done to repair our economy? What bills have they passed to support our industries and create middle-class jobs? I urge my colleagues to support this amendment. Keep food on the table of struggling American families. That's what we should be doing, and we should support this amendment. I yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition? The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the military has taken $500 billion in budget cuts this year. Congress has slashed its budget by 11% in the last 3 years. And this year, at the President's command, several government agencies have cut vital programs and employees due to mandatory spending cuts. Everyone across the country is being asked to do more with less: families, businesses, the military, and government agencies. But the President is sending Americans another message: you pay while he plays. That's right. The Obama family is taking an extravagant summer vacation to Africa, costing taxpayers an estimated $100 million. That is obscene, and Americans should be outraged. This money could keep the public White House tours funded, which the President canceled due to budget constraints, for 26 years. It could pay for an additional 22,000 college degrees for soldiers enrolled in the Army's tuition assistance program. It could reverse the potential $90 million in cuts for Border Patrol agents and border security. In fact, it could fund the entire Houston Astros payroll times 4. Mr. Speaker, instead of asking everyone but himself to make enormous sacrifices, it's time for the President to make his and put the people first. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentlelady from Hawaii seek recognition? Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very proud to honor today someone who is a great servant leader and who I'm honored to call my friend, Chief Master Sergeant Denise Jelinski Hall. She'll be retiring later this month after serving nearly 30 years in the United States Air Force, where she earned the distinction of being the first female and the first Air National Guard member to serve as the National Guard Bureau's senior enlisted leader. This is the highest enlisted rank in the National Guard that one is able to hold. While she's originally from a small town in Minnesota and has served everywhere from Nebraska to Qatar, I'm especially proud of the tremendous impact that she's made on her nearly 20 years that she spent serving in the Hawaii Air National Guard. Chief Jelinski Hall is happiest when she is spending time with soldiers and airmen and has done so in all 50 states and around the world as she leads by example, encouraging troops to focus on personal growth and education. She should serve as an inspiration to young men and women across the country through her great work ethic and leadership by example. Congratulations and mahalo nui loa to Chief Jelinski Hall on her incredible, long, accomplished career in the service of our country. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back her time. What purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a member of the Agriculture Committee, I strongly support the Farm Bill we are considering today and the reforms that it brings. The EPA has been implementing what is known as a total maximum daily load on the 6-state Chesapeake Bay watershed. The TMDL is often described as a pollution diet because it mandates water quality standards and nutrient discharges into the watershed. Aside from the great cost, one of the concerns I've had is the science behind the TMDL. EPA's model is substantially different than USDA's, and as such, I've been a strong advocate for EPA utilizing the USDA's data and agricultural expertise while implementing this mandate. This is why I'm offering an amendment to the Farm Bill, which will require USDA to provide such data and consultation to EPA while ensuring privacy of farmers. The Chesapeake Bay is a national treasure. It needs and deserves our attention. However, these restoration activities, which require taxpayer dollars, should include the best science available to continue the great strides we're already making with the health of the Bay. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentlelady from California seek recognition? Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, in this, the richest country in the world, it is unconscionable that the Farm Bill we are debating today cuts nearly $21 billion from SNAP, our nation's most important anti-hunger program. Today, 1 in 7 Americans depends on the SNAP program to put food on the table. The draconian cuts in this bill will remove many from this program and increase hunger among millions of Americans already struggling to survive. Hardest hit will be children who, in addition to suffering the agony of hunger, will be at risk of having disability because studies have shown that the SNAP program is a critical buffer for preventing developmental challenges. Our vulnerable senior population, for which SNAP is a vital safety net, also will be put at risk because it can make the difference between having food or going hungry. Mr. Speaker, there are better alternatives to reducing our deficit. While it is true that the Farm Bill is an important bill that regulates and protects our food industry, it is also true that it is tragic that in the United States of America, this bill, as introduced, will increase the pain and suffering of hunger, which already shamefully exists in our country. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. What purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
The gentleman from Minnesota is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, as you can see, I'm wearing a yellow ribbon here today, and I do so to recognize the newest Minnesota Yellow Ribbon Networks being officially proclaimed at the National Guard Camp Ripley near the community of Little Falls in north central Minnesota, which is also in my district. Yellow Ribbon is a truly remarkable program that eases the transition of our soldiers to civilian life by providing job training, counseling of all kinds, and support services for service members, veterans, and military families. So I want to say a special thanks to Morrison and Crow Wing counties in Minnesota and to the communities of Little Falls, Motley, Royalton, Swanville, Sobieski, Harding, Buckman, Uppsala, Randall, Piers, Bolus, Elmdale, and Lastrop, all in my district, for supporting our returning servicemen and women as Yellow Ribbon communities. We thank and honor all our military for their service to our great nation. Mr. Speaker, thank you. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from Rhode Island seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, unless Congress acts in less than 2 weeks, the interest rates on federally subsidized Stafford loans will double from 3.4% to 6.8% for more than 7 million students. In my home state of Rhode Island, which is home to more than 40,000 borrowers of federally subsidized Stafford loans, this means that higher education will become less attainable for more and more young people who depend on financial aid. As we work to get our economy back on track, we should be making it easier, not more difficult, for young people to access higher education. But once again, the House Republican leadership is failing to act in the best interest of the American people. Rather than working towards a common-sense solution on student loan interest rates, we're spending this week voting on a $20 billion cut to children's nutrition programs and a bill that would severely restrict reproductive health care for women. This has gone on long enough. In the interest of our constituents, Republicans and Democrats should set aside their differences and get back to solving the problems that our country faces. And the Republican leaders in the House should bring bills to the floor for a vote that focus on protecting students from interest rate increases and get Americans back to work. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition? The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The current United States sugar program is a clear example of government intrusion into a market. Nowhere is there a larger gap between the U.S. government's free trade rhetoric and its protectionist practices than in our sugar policy. The most prominent argument I hear from the other side is this program is of no cost to the taxpayers. That simply isn't true. It was reported yesterday the USDA intends to purchase sugar off the domestic market, costing taxpayers nearly $38 million. The government then plans to sell this sugar at a loss to ethanol companies. And who is ultimately footing the bill for this not-so-sweet deal? The taxpayers. But the most egregious point is that other countries actively try to lure U.S. companies to relocate. An official Canadian government brochure states Canadian sugar users enjoy a significant advantage. The average price of refined sugar is usually 30 to 40% lower in Canada than the U.S. Now, when a government program becomes a recruitment technique to lure away our manufacturers and move U.S. jobs abroad, I believe reform is not only necessary, but it's essential. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition? The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, since March of 2011 in Syria, 90,000 people have been killed, millions have been displaced internally, hundreds of thousands have fled, and between 100 and 150 people have been murdered by Bashar al-Assad's chemical weapons. Now, we can debate what we should do and how far we should go, but there is one thing that we can all agree on, and that is legislation that my colleague from Oklahoma, Congressman Tom Cole, and I have introduced on a bipartisan basis that would bring Bashar al-Assad to the International Criminal Court, where he would be prosecuted for war crimes and crimes against humanity. This is an example of bipartisan cooperation and accord on a challenging foreign policy crisis. I urge my colleagues to co-sponsor the Cole-Israel resolution and pass it immediately. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, by direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 271 and ask for its immediate consideration.
Clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 34, House Resolution 271, resolved that at any time after the adoption of this resolution, the Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolved into the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for further consideration of the bill, H.R. 1947, to provide for the reform and continuation of agricultural and other programs of the Department of Agriculture through fiscal year 2018 and for other purposes. No further general debate shall be in order. Section 2A. In lieu of the amendments recommended by the Committees on Agriculture and the Judiciary now printed in the bill, it shall be in order to consider as an original bill for the purpose of amendment under the 5-minute rule an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee Print 113-14 modified by the amendment printed in Part A of the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution. That amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered as read. All points of order against that amendment in the nature of a substitute are waived. B. No amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute made in order as original text shall be in order except those printed in Part B of the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution and amendments en bloc described in Section 3 of this resolution. C. Each amendment printed in Part B of the report of the Committee on Rules shall be considered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, may be withdrawn by its proponent at any time before action thereon, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. D. All points of order against amendments printed in Part B of the report of the Committee on Rules or against amendments en bloc described in Section 3 of this resolution are waived. Section 3. It shall be in order at any time for the Chair of the Committee on Agriculture or his designee to offer amendments en bloc consisting of amendments printed in Part B of the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution not earlier disposed of. Amendments en bloc offered pursuant to this section shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for 20 minutes equally divided and controlled by the Chair and Ranking Minority Member of the Committee on Agriculture or their designees, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. The original proponent of an amendment included in such amendments en bloc may insert a statement in the congressional record immediately before the disposition of the amendments en bloc. Section 4. At the conclusion of consideration of the bill for amendment, the committee shall rise and report the bill to the House with such amendments as may have been adopted. Any member may demand a separate vote in the House on any amendment adopted in the Committee of the Whole to the bill or to the amendment in the nature of a substitute made in order as original text. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill and amendments thereto to final passage without intervening motion, except one motion to recommit with or without instructions.
What purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Section 426 of the Congressional Budget Impoundment Control Act of 1974, I make a point of order against consideration of the rule, House Resolution 271. Section 426 of the Budget Act specifically states that the Rules Committee may not waive the point of order prescribed by Section 425 of that same Act. House Resolution 271 states, I quote, all points of order against amendments printed in Part B of the report of the Committee on Rules or against amendments en bloc described in Section 3 of this resolution are waived, end quote. Therefore, I make a point of order pursuant to Section 426 that this rule may not be considered.
The gentleman from Massachusetts makes a point of order that the resolution violates Section 426A of the Congressional Budget Act of 1974. The gentleman has met the threshold burden under the rule, and the gentleman from Massachusetts and a member opposed each will control 10 minutes of debate on the question of consideration. Following debate, the Chair will put the question of consideration as the statutory means of disposing of the point of order. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. Loebsack.
The gentleman from Iowa is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do thank the gentleman from Massachusetts for yielding. I would first like to voice my support for the gentleman's particular amendment, actually, that he has before us and will later on today, that restores the unfair SNAP cuts. I thank the gentleman for his amendment, for his courage, and for his very, very good idea of restoring those cuts. When it comes to the underlying bill, later today I will offer an amendment to ensure farmers and rural small businesses have continued access to a critical tool to pursue investments in energy technologies and to meet their energy needs in an affordable and sustainable way. Currently, the Rural Energy for America program supports farmers and rural small businesses in pursuing sustainable and value-added energy project investments, including wind power, biofuels, solar, or anaerobic digestion. These projects put people to work. They create entrepreneurial opportunities, and they have created new value-added opportunities for our farmers, for rural small businesses, and for our communities. I have heard from Iowans about the importance of this energy and economic development tool, and my amendment ensures farmers and rural businesses have continued access to it. I'm strongly opposed to the changes made in the underlying bill that weaken essential energy initiatives that create jobs and boost our economy. Because of these initiatives, thousands of jobs have been created in rural communities in recent years. In Iowa alone, over 1,600 rural energy projects were initiated between 2003 and 2012, mainly stemming from Farm Bill energy programs. My amendment stresses the importance of Farm Bill energy programs to job creation and our rural economies and allows one of our best resources, our farmers, to play a critical role in our domestic energy production, and I urge support for it. And as I said at the outset, I urge support for my colleague from Massachusetts' amendment to restore the SNAP cuts as well. Thank you very much, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts. Reserves?
Yeah, I reserve, Mr. Speaker.
What purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to claim my time in opposition, point of order, and in favor of consideration of the resolution.
The gentleman is recognized for 10 minutes.
I appreciate the Speaker. The question really before us today, Mr. Speaker, is plain and simple, and that is, should the House now consider HRES 271? And I have great respect not only for the gentleman from Iowa and for the gentleman from Massachusetts. Yesterday we sat through a very, very long committee hearing where we considered over 200 amendments that were presented to the Rules Committee. And I believe that what we have done with the rule that was in reference here and being questioned here on the floor is not only a very fair and bipartisan approach, but we took this actually from the Ag Committee, where the gentleman from Minnesota, the ranking member, and the chairman of the committee from Iowa, both who have not only extensive farm backgrounds but also extensive service here in the House to the people of the United States in their service both as chairman of the Agriculture Committee. The bill was brought to the Rules Committee, bipartisan basis. We talked about the amendments that the committee felt like was worthy. We worked extensively with both the committee and other committees of jurisdiction. We had member after member come to the Rules Committee in a fair and open process. We deliberated. The gentleman from Massachusetts knows that he, in some sense, got some satisfaction with how the process worked. And so today, what we're here for is, yes, to talk about the amendments, some that were made in order and some which change policy. But the essence of this, are we going to put a point of order against the bill? I think that the resolution waives all points of order against amendments printed in the Rules Committee report, yes, and the Committee on Rules is not aware of any violation of the Unfunded Mandates Reform Act. I think this is simply an opportunity for my friends to come to the floor and to allow more discussion and time, and I respect that. I respect not only that the gentleman from Massachusetts has very strong feelings as a member of the Agriculture Committee, as a senior member of the Rules Committee, but also those members of the Democratic caucus who have strong feelings about some changes that are taking place. So I admire my colleagues. I disagree. I do not believe that in any way that there should be any point of order against the bill. I think it's open. I think it's fair. I think it's inclusive. I think it includes a wide-ranging group of ideas and thoughts that are directly germane to the appropriateness of the Agriculture Committee and other committees that have jurisdiction. I think the Rules Committee did an awesome job. I think we did this in a fair and open process. I think our product is good. So how would I characterize it? I think this is a fair rule that made 103 amendments from both sides of the aisle. I think 53 Democratic amendments and 50 Republican amendments in order. There were a number of bipartisan amendments. It's a fair rule that comes from a good process. So, in order to allow the House to continue its scheduled business for the day, I encourage us to keep moving. I thank the gentleman and respect the gentleman, and he knows this, that we have been dear friends for many, many years on this committee. I know he wants more time, and I respect that. So I urge all members to vote yes on the question of consideration of the resolution if necessary, and I reserve my time.
Gentleman reserved. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
I appreciate the comments from the gentleman from Texas, and I'd like to yield now 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Wisconsin, Ms. Moore.
Gentlelady from Wisconsin is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask to be able to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
My full remarks in the record.
Without objection.
Thank you so much. And thank you, gentlemen from Massachusetts, for yielding me this couple of minutes. I would hope that we would listen to the point of order that's been raised by Mr. McGovern. You know, for one thing, this bill criminalizes poverty. So many things in this bill, you know, no felony records will be, people with felony records be allowed to get food stamps, that there be work requirements in order to get food stamps. These kinds of amendments and additions that we are going to see in this bill really raises some, add to the fallacious arguments that we have heard about the gargantuan cuts that are made to the SNAP program. That SNAP is run inefficiently. That these cuts won't hurt anyone. That these cuts don't serve the most vulnerable. Let me just reiterate the facts. SNAP is effectively targeted at our most vulnerable populations, primarily serving children, seniors, and the disabled and poorest communities, people who cannot work, people who don't have felony records. In my own state of Wisconsin, 47.2% of SNAP households include children. 15.4% include the very elderly, and 21.7% include a disabled person. 84.3% of those receiving SNAP in my state are children, elderly, and disabled. Nationwide, 76% of SNAP households are composed of those who are children, seniors, or disabled persons. 68.7% of SNAP households have a gross income at or below 100% of the poverty level. And just let me say, for the going forward, that as soon as this bill is enacted, as soon as we take away the categorical eligibility, 200 children will lose free lunch. Children. Thank you so much, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back her time. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. In fact, the gentlewoman is correct. There is an amendment that was presented at Rules Committee that's been made in order that essentially does what the gentlewoman says, and she'll have a chance to vote for it or against it. But what it says is the amendment ends eligibility of food stamps for those convicted who are rapists, pedophiles, and murderers. So the gentlewoman and every member of this body today will have a chance to say on record, that's okay if you're a rapist, if you're a convicted rapist or pedophile or murderer, that's okay for you to be eligible for food stamps. In a program that does compete against mothers and children who, in these difficult times, you're seeing the Agriculture Committee try and set priorities about who should receive this government assistance. This amendment has not been accepted yet, but every member of this body will be able to help prioritize. And the amendment that the gentlewoman speaks of is about whether we will let rapists, pedophiles, and murderers who are convicted felons to continue to receive food stamps. And the gentlewoman is right. And today, she will get her chance to help us prioritize these government programs about who should be receiving food stamps in America. I reserve my time.
Gentleman from Texas reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, it's my pleasure to yield 1 1/2 minutes to the gentleman from Nevada, Mr. Horsford.
Gentleman from Nevada is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I ask permission to revise and extend my remarks?
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, let me commend the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. McGovern, and your leadership for 18 years on fighting for the needs of SNAP program assistance for our most vulnerable citizens. I rise and stand with Mr. McGovern against this procedural rule and in support of the underlying amendment that Mr. McGovern, myself, and other members have. This amendment will prevent cuts to the SNAP funding program. You know, the Federal Agricultural Reform and Risk Management Act of 2013 includes $20.5 billion in cuts to the SNAP program. That will come on top of an expiration of a benefits boost from the Recovery Act of 2009. SNAP provides food assistance to approximately 46 million Americans in need, and it is estimated that at least 353,000 Nevadans will feel the impact of the upcoming double whammy of SNAP cuts from the Farm Bill and the expiration of the Recovery Act boost. The bottom line is that the SNAP program is our nation's most important anti-hunger program. It kept 4.7 million people out of poverty in 2011, including 2.1 million children. Now, I had a community conference call with my constituents and families in my district who count on SNAP. Many of them live in food deserts. The benefits they receive right now aren't enough for a healthy meal.
30 seconds.
Gentleman's recognized for 30 seconds.
And yet, we are talking about cutting these benefits even further while we continue subsidies to big industries that are well off. Those priorities are backwards. So for the mother in my district who is expecting another child and who counts on SNAP, for the disabled family that stands in line for hours at the food bank, and for elderly who rely on SNAP to get the food that they need, for everyone who made their voice heard by calling my office, I refuse to accept that we should cut $20.5 billion in vital food assistance programs, and I continue to work with Mr. McGovern and my colleagues until we can restore these funds.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much, and I appreciate the gentleman for coming down to the floor. And I want to respond to the gentleman that what this bill is about is trying to make decisions about how we're going to take in difficult times to the government also. There are 25 million people unemployed and underemployed as a result of the policies that President Obama has placed on this country. Millions of people cannot find work today. Millions of people across this country who are denied opportunities because the job market out there is not growing. We're seeing rules and regulations, what is known as Obamacare, causing employers to back away from hiring people. The President's inability to make a decision about a simple, most publicized and most looked at pipeline that would employ thousands of people in this country and us use energy from our friends. The President's inability to lead is what is causing this country to have massive unemployment and a GDP rate of about 1.5%. It is a nightmare for people. So I do understand that we have those in our midst who are in trouble. I don't think this bill is ever aimed at, and we shouldn't try and say that it would be aimed at the disabled, mothers with children. That's not what we're trying to accomplish here. What we're trying to accomplish is to end eligibility of food stamps that compete against those families, those needy families that we talked about, for rapists, pedophiles, and murderers. That's why you see members of the Democratic Party coming down here today, and they're saying we're going to take it away from other people. No, rapists, pedophiles, murderers. Furthermore, under the current law, people who receive as little as $1 in energy benefits, $1 in state benefits, automatically qualify for SNAP payments. And this legislation that we're talking about today says if you're going to give away a federal benefit, the state has to have some skin in the game. You just can't give away something that comes from somewhere else. This legislation closes the costly loopholes that have been out there. And without reform, you're going to continue to see dead people, illegal immigrants, lottery winners, and others who are still eligible for SNAP. That is what we are doing as we reform this bill today. We are doing this because we believe it is the right thing to do to save the system. I reserve my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, it's my privilege to yield 1 1/2 minutes to the gentleman from Rhode Island, my friend, Mr. Langevin.
The gentleman from Rhode Island is recognized for 1.5 minutes. Without objection.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I support the point of order that the gentleman has raised against the rule, and I thank the gentleman from Massachusetts for raising that point of order. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in opposition to the rule and to the proposed cuts to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program in the underlying Farm Bill. In the wealthiest nation in human history, it is simply unconscionable that every American cannot afford life's basic necessities. SNAP helps millions of Americans living in poverty put food on the table. 80% of the households receiving SNAP right now earn below the federal poverty level, making it a vital form of assistance for millions of working families. Now, yesterday, I proudly joined a group of my Democratic colleagues in taking the SNAP challenge, a commitment to living on no more than $4.50 in daily food costs. Mr. Speaker, every member of Congress should experience what it's like to subsist on such a paltry sum and should understand how the decisions we make affect the lives of hardworking Americans. Now, when we take food off the plates of hungry children, we have a moral obligation to fully comprehend the consequences of those actions. Under this bill, 2 million people will lose their eligibility, and many more will see reduced nutritional assistance. Mr. Speaker, I urge a no vote on this rule, and I encourage members to vote against these unnecessary and harmful cuts. We can do better. We can put that funding back into this Farm Bill and make it a bill that we can all support. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentleman from Texas.
I reserve my time.
Reserves.
Speaker, it is my pleasure now to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Cicilline.
The gentleman from Rhode Island is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. And, Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the point of order and in strong opposition to the bill that would cut more than $20 billion from critical nutrition programs, especially those that serve our nation's most vulnerable children. In my home state of Rhode Island, it's estimated that nearly 67,000 children rely on support from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. The bill before us today would devastate funding that these and millions of children and families all across our country depend on each and every day. And because of the way that this funding is structured, it would be especially devastating for states like mine, where families are struggling in a difficult economy and where reductions in livelihood will be a great hardship in long, cold New England winters. In the next couple of days, we'll consider a wide range of amendments, some like one offered by my friend, the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. McGovern, of which I'm a co-sponsor, would restore this critical funding for nutritional programs. Others would impose additional burdens on families already struggling to get by. Mr. Speaker, the actions we take in this chamber and the bills that we enact into law should reflect our values as a country. We should not take actions that will make hunger worse in America, and this bill will do that. I urge my colleagues to oppose these drastic cuts to nutrition programs and support the McGovern amendment so that we can continue to help improve the lives of millions of families and children across our nation. America has always stood for the idea that we look after each other, we take care of the least fortunate among us, and most importantly, we protect our most treasured asset, the children of America. I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman from Massachusetts reserved. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask the gentleman if he has any further speakers or if he believes that we have now gotten to the end of this opportunity for
Mr.
debate.
Speaker, how much time do I have remaining?
The gentleman from Massachusetts has 1 minute.
And I believe I have the right to close. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you, sir. I'll reserve my time.
Mr. Speaker, let me close for our side.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Let me thank my colleagues who have come to the floor to speak in support of an amendment that I and dozens of other members have authored to repeal the SNAP cuts, to repeal the $20.5 billion worth of cuts in SNAP that will result in 2 million people losing the benefit and hundreds of thousands of children losing a free breakfast or lunch at school. That cut is too much. It is too harsh. It goes over the top. It is a deal breaker for many of us when it comes to the Farm Bill. What we should be about in this House of Representatives is trying to improve the quality of life for people, lift people up, not put people down. And these cuts put people down. We can do much better. And again, I thank my colleagues for coming to the floor and look forward to more debate on this, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Yields back his time. The gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much, and I appreciate the gentleman from Massachusetts for furthering this, his feelings that he wants to talk about this. It is true there are going to be people dropped off the rolls. We're having to make decisions based upon money. There's vote today. Vote today has not been decided whether rapists, pedophiles, or murderers will be eligible. Also, whether we're going to have people have to qualify on their own as opposed to some other consideration maybe that a state would put. And we're going to take off those that are lottery winners, illegal aliens, and people, quite honestly, who should have the money to pay for these things. And that's what we're doing today. So in order to allow the House to continue its scheduled business, which we're trying to do today, I urge members to vote yes on the question consideration resolution. I yield back my time.
All debate time has expired. The question is, will the House now consider the resolution? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The question of consideration is decided in the affirmative. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 hour.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much, and I want to thank my colleagues on the Democratic side for not only their vigorous support of the things which they believe in today on this important bill, but also for their consideration, participation, and bipartisanship yesterday as the Rules Committee considered this important bill. I believe it is important what we are doing in the House. I think doing our work on a bipartisan basis should draw the attention of the President of the United States, who has said that he will veto this bill, veto the bill before we even see what it looks like. I think that we should understand that what we're trying to do is work together. And so, for the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentleman from Worcester, Massachusetts, my very dear friend and good friend, Mr. McGovern, opinion which I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
During consideration of this resolution, all times yield for the purpose of debate only. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, we've already had a lot of discussion about this awesome bill, Farm Bill, that comes to us today. And H.Res. 271 provides for a structured rule for consideration of H.R. 1947. This rule provides for discussion opportunities for members of the minority and the majority, both Republicans and Democrats who represent 700,000 people back home, to come together with their thoughts and ideas about how to make our farm policies and the things which are included in this bill even better, sustainable and moving forward so that we can know that we have done our job. This week, 230 amendments were submitted to the Rules Committee. The rule before us today provides for consideration of 103 of those amendments, 50 Republican and 53 Democrat or bipartisan amendments. Many of the amendments submitted were duplicative, some violated the rules of the House, and several were non-germane. Given the universe of the amendments the committee received, I believe that this rule allows the House to debate each and every important issue contained in the bill and provides this body with an opportunity to work its will. Despite the large number of amendments submitted, I believe the underlying legislation, H.R. 1947, is a strong and meaningful statement and measure that provides our nation with agriculture and nutrition policy necessary to meet the needs of this country. And I want to commend in particular the young chairman of the Agriculture Committee, the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Lucas, and the ranking member, the gentleman from Minnesota, Colin Peterson, who have worked together over the years, not just as time when Mr. Peterson served as chairman of the committee, but also throughout the years that Mr. Lucas has worked in a bipartisan basis together, the committee, to work on agriculture policy. Their hard work over the past several years have led us to the point of where we are today. Hard work, working together, thinking, talking about the policy that would be good for the country. That's where we are today. We followed that up with an opportunity to make sure on a bipartisan basis that I work together with my colleagues at the Rules Committee. Notwithstanding Mrs. Slaughter was busy on the floor a lot of the time yesterday, the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. McGovern, sat in, heard the amendments with the rest of the Rules Committee. We worked together, staffs, to try and make as many amendments in order that would create an opportunity to follow the leadership set by Mr. Peterson and Chairman Lucas. So, this year's Farm Bill reforms our nation's agricultural programs to provide American farmers with innovative risk management tools. It reforms our nation's supplemental nutrition programs for the first time in nearly 2 decades, and it invests in meaningful conservation programs to ensure that future generations of Americans benefit from the same resources that we do today. The bottom line is that topsoil that is in America, which is the greatest in the world, enables our farmers and ranchers to produce goods and services, food, that serves the entire world, and I am proud of supporting those people who live a way of life in a rural area. I know them well, and I respect the hard work and what they do to make our country stronger and better. Impressively, H.R. 1947 accomplishes all of this while making difficult decisions on saving over $40 billion over the life of the bill. This legislation is common sense. This legislation is bipartisan. This legislation allows us, through an amendment process, to make many tough and difficult decisions based upon representation of this House of Representatives about issues because we're re-looking at the entire Farm Bill. Most of all, I hope it's fiscally responsible for those, and we offer solutions to not only consumers, but also solutions to farmers about how we are going to keep their products and services, farmers and ranchers, families, rural communities, and consumers all in a balance to where we know that through the leadership of this House of Representatives that we have done our job. That is why we're here today. We're here to take on tough decisions. We're here to make this Farm Bill better, and I'm proud of the product that we present today. I urge my colleagues to support this rule, and I support the underlying legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves his time.